This podcast is part of the Some Buddies Network. You're never alone when you've got some buddies.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as Mr. Most Days Off, and today we have another special guest for another special episode. Just please don't ask him about that fish thing. But we're going to get to him in just a moment. First, of course, joining me as always, your co-host with the most, Richie the Whiz Kid. How you doing today, Rich?
I guess to go along with you, I'm a bit fishy, Miles.
Yeah.
They really drive home the fish jokes in this one. Wow. But there's plenty to talk about there. There's plenty to talk about everywhere else. Let me go ahead and throw it back to you. The man, the myth. He's not quite a mop and not quite a puppet. He's Miles.
Thank you for that one. And our very special guest today, local Dallas comedian Daniel Mathews, coming to the show. How are you today, Daniel?
Oh, good until you started on that name, man. You were doing so hot. Let's cancel the podcast.
It's over.
And now we can't edit that out because you called him out on it, which makes it even better.
Yeah, no mistakes. I demand perfection. But I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, we're so glad to have you here today. Yet another person that has come into my life through Dallas Comedy House, and another person at Dallas Comedy House who we bonded over talking about The Simpsons. And when it came time to talk to you about which episode you wanted to join us for, you very passionately declared a Fish Called Selma. And
Absolutely.
That is the episode we're talking about today. But before we dive too much into the specifics of that episode, Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about your connection to The Simpsons.
Well, as you mentioned, I am an improvisational comedian in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I perform regularly in, 4 troupes now at the Dallas Comedy House, and I'm also on the main stage cast at the 4-Day Weekend Theater.
Nice.
So I do a whole lot of improv, and I am also, and you'll see links to my interest in A Fish Called Selma here, I am also a puppeteer. I freelance puppeteer for a number of different companies and productions, and of course have mad respect and really love the Muppets and all things Jim Henson. So the Muppets Go Medieval bit, not to jump ahead, really strikes me to the core. My connection with The Simpsons, I really credit The Simpsons, among other films and such, of course, but The Simpsons really helped me understand what humor was. My dad was really into The Simpsons, so it was unavoidable for me to see it in the house growing up. And so my parents, while initially it was like, I don't know, he's too young, it was, like I said, unavoidable, ended up watching it and absolutely loving it. All the wordplay, all the different kinds of humor, the absurd, explosions from a can of beer, etc. It just taught me different kinds of comedy.
That is such a unique perspective because most people we talk to either come from the camp of their parents were oblivious to The Simpsons or they thought The Simpsons was the devil. But you are the first guest that we have had that essentially had The Simpsons forced upon him by his parents, it sounds like.
Right. Yeah, I specifically remember, because I'm younger than I might seem. I was born in 92, so The Simpsons were already rocking and rolling when I was born. And I specifically remember when Burger King had those Treehouse of Horror toys one Halloween year, and we were just going to Burger King after Burger King trying to get my dad all of those figures, and he still has most of them.
And probably some pretty high cholesterol to go along with it.
Don't we all?
That's funny. Actually, I do very fondly remember those Halloween toys. I actually have right here in front of me the other line they did with the Simpsons camping toys that they had, where like Bart has the backpack and Homer's in his fishing gear. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it was a very similar run.
I'm not.
They were so popular. I think it was actually the camping ones came first, and then they brought back the Halloween toys because of how popular the run was.
I'll have to look up the one sometime when you won't hear my keyboard
click, click.
over the podcast.
Totally.
Was that also Burger King, Miles?
I do believe it was, in fact, Burger King. Yeah, they had a contract, if I remember correctly, and they ran them not like back to back, but actually surprisingly close to each other.
Well, see, that's interesting because when we were in high school, Burger King did the series of those watches with different Simpsons characters. Because I had the Krusty
watches
one
too.
Yeah, you could hit a button and have like a voice line pop. Krusty's was obviously his laugh all the time, and I did that nonstop. Everyone always wanted to hear it at school.
Until you kind of get it like all worn down with the battery, so it's like her.
Man, I shouldn't call you out on it because I don't have a better one. That is much closer to Woody the Woodpecker than Krusty the Clown's laugh.
You're absolutely right, and that is why Richie typically does our Krusty lines.
Good. I look forward to it, except he's not in this episode.
I think Krusty was in one shot of this episode.
Oh, okay. Well, then I look forward to it.
Wasn't the picture of Krusty one of the ones that was featured in the restaurant that Troy and Selma go on a date?
Yeah.
You could cover that line.
Gotcha.
Daniel, one of the things I was actually really excited to talk to you about in general, and I didn't even at the time realize there was a connection to this episode until I came back and watched it to review for this podcast, was the puppeteering background that you have. I just think that is absolutely fascinating. And the way I learned that you were a puppeteer is because of your improv troupe, not popular Pixar movie Inside Out, but the improv troupe Empty Inside, which I just think is so creative because I'll let you talk about it more, but it's essentially improv with puppets.
Right. I wish I could take credit for the name, but that goes to former member moved down to Austin recently. Her name's Casey Ryan, and she came up with the name because, the double entendre, where it seems like a sad thing to name an improv troupe, and then, of course, when you're not using them, puppets are inside. But yes, we do improvised puppet shows where you can full out see the puppeteers. We don't try to hide. We try and ventriloquize. It's called the cabaret style of puppeteer, like an Avenue Q and whatnot. And we just go for it because that's what makes it easier. But I learned to puppeteer back in 2013 at a workshop called the Beyond the Sock workshop. I think they have another one coming up in June, and basically learned how to puppeteer for TV and film, and initially started taking it because at that time in my life, I thought I was going to graduate college and immediately move to Chicago to try to, make it big in comedy, which is where you go to do that. And I thought, I'll diversify what I can do as a performer. I don't know anyone who can puppeteer. I'll take this workshop. But it turned out to very quickly become a passion of mine that really rivals improv comedy, and as so far as my artistic ambitions.
That's so cool, and you can really see your passion for it when you perform on stage, just how much fun you have with that troupe. And you're a great improviser with or without a puppet, but it's just such a unique...
Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely, man. It's a joy to watch you on stage, but it's just so unique. Like you said, you're absolutely right. That's something that I don't think a lot of people... that's a skill that I just don't think a lot of people have. I think it's a often overlooked side of the entertainment industry, but... then you have people, like you mentioned earlier, Jim Henson, who go on to just kind of create this entire world of puppets that has become a literal phenomenon.
Oh, and Jim Henson, he revolutionized it for TV and film. Almost everything you see now is just other puppeteers trying to be like Jim Henson and what he and his company of weirdos figured out over time. Because, you go and watch the early Muppet Show and all that, the early, coffee commercials or whatever he did. They're rough stuff, but are there. So you can watch as they're just kind of figuring it out. And now it's just, that's the gold standard, is everything that they figured out.
Well, and then they do so much now, too, where, I mean, like, Jim Henson was responsible for one of my personal favorite childhood movies, which was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which there's a lot of actual controversy with him and that company, that movie. He wasn't really a fan of, to be honest. But regardless, his work in that film, where they did with the, not only now do you have full-on puppets, but you actually have actors inside these puppets with animatronic elements, and just it's just mind-blowing to see. I mean, for me, when that movie came out, I was like 5, and you know, my mind melted just seeing these cartoon characters that I adored now living and breathing on the streets of New York.
Right. I mean, they really, first of all, I'm kind of unaware or ignorant of any controversy between him and that company. I'll need to look into that.
So, real quick of it is he essentially disowned his work on that because he was not a fan of the adult tones that it took. And that was actually partially, toys were the other reason, but that was also partially the reason that the second Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie has such a different tone to it.
Oh, okay. I've actually seen I've seen videos demonstrating how that, like, radio-assisted, remote-controlled puppeteering works. It's so intricate and so cool. I would give a whole lot to get to play with one of those rigs. I went to the Museum of the Moving Image up in New York. It's in Astoria in Queens. And they had, I don't know if they had the Ninja Turtle rig there, but they had one for the Dark Crystal headsets.
Cool. Oh, nice.
And they also had one for, it was some, like, DNA character, that was a digital puppet that was like an early version of that. And it's just so neat to me to see how those kinds of things work.
Yeah, it's always interesting. I think it's interesting to learn about almost anything. Even, you know, for you have a passion for puppeteering, so obviously that's going to be a big draw. But I'm just fascinated, I should say, whenever you see almost any craft and just kind of getting to go behind the scenes. I'm the type that I'm always listening to directors' commentaries, not only for The Simpsons, but also for various movies and shows I enjoy, just because I love learning about the process that they go through to create these wonderful things that we enjoy.
Absolutely.
See, neither one of you brought my favorite puppeteering display, which would definitely be, and I know I'm saying this with a sarcastic tone, but I absolutely wish it was a full-length movie, is the end of Forgetting Sarah Marshall with the Dracula puppeteering. Like, I absolutely love that. It's my favorite part of the freaking movie, and I wish they would do something like that, like on film, and do a full-length one.
I didn't combine the two, but before I even saw that movie, you know, I was already puppeteering, and it wasn't a puppet musical, but our previous guest, David Allison, and myself, along with our friend Colton Winburn, co-wrote a musical based off of the Friday the 13th.
Oh my God,
movies.
That's another franchise
so much
that
fun.
I am just...
So I'm already pretty close to Jason Segel in that movie by puppeteering and writing horror comedy musicals.
That's fantastic. Wow, what a tie-in right there.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I definitely would love to check that out at some point.
I don't think we have a full recording that's any good. We have a low-quality one I'll send you later.
Very cool. I'm fine with it. It's like 90s VHS tapes.
Yeah, with people walking in front of the camera. It's like a 90s home movie.
That's totally
of
great.
Some people on a stage.
My aunt's probably sitting there smoking a cigarette with the smoke going through the screen the whole time. If it's anything like my home videos.
She was great.
So we already mentioned it just a little bit. There's actually a great tie-in to puppeteering and this episode, which you may have known when you asked me that you chose this episode to be a part of. I had no idea till I revisited it. But the Muppets Go Medieval was the beginning part of this episode. Did that have a effect on your choice, or was that unrelated and you just like this episode for other reasons?
I'm going to be honest, like, I would say it affects it, but in the way that, like, a piece of parsley makes a dinner look nicer.
Sure.
where I'm all in it for the musical later on. Like, I find that the Simpsons episodes with the musical segments are, they get an easy access to up near the top of the list. Homer versus York, Bart After Dark, they all rise up close to the top of the list when they have those nice original songs written.
The songs from The Simpsons are some of the greatest part of an already great show. You're absolutely right. And this song is, by some very powerful people, or at least in the Simpsons world, some of the higher-ups at The Simpsons consider this to be their favorite song of all time, the Dr. Zayas, including Bill Oakley, the showrunner, who has literally said that he has heard the line from chimpanzee to chimpanzee all over the world, just because it has so much reach everywhere.
Oh, it's a beautiful line. And I also, we'll get into this later, but also have to give props. Another reason this episode is so far up, I think Jub Jub is one of my favorite, side bits. You can barely call Jub a character, no offense to him.
Hey, the Jub Jub Simpsons trading card is like a rare collector's item. I have no idea if that's true, but it should be.
Oh, you got my hopes up.
Conan O'Brien just got really mad at you.
He probably did, yeah. Very cool. Well, let's go ahead and dive into this episode, Jub Jub and all. Yeah, let's move in. We start this episode as A Fish Called Selma, which originally aired on March 24th, 1996. Flat out, the entire reason this episode exists is because Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein absolutely love Phil Hartman, and they wanted to have him in as much of this episode as they possibly could, so they wrote an episode that strongly featured him. It came in exceptionally long, so there is no chalk gag on this one, though they did still have a very quick couch gag, where the Simpsons are malfunctioning or falling over wind-up dolls that don't all successfully make it to the couch, but they try really hard.
Homer.
I was rewatching the episode, actually earlier today, just to prep, and I noticed, perhaps for the first time, go back and watch that couch gag and pay close attention to the Marge robot. It's easy to overlook her because she's not moving as much as all the other ones, but she's got this look on her face that is just ridiculous.
Oh, really?
Just mouth agape and terrified looking.
Darn, I have to watch a great episode of The Simpsons again.
Oh, man.
We open up this episode with a movie for a rained-out ball game. It's the Muppets Go Medieval. I love that, just that whole little screen that sits in there. That honestly is just straight out of the 90s. I even have, actually, it's a VHS recording I have of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original movie from when I was a kid, that it had this exact type of screen. It wasn't for a rained-out ball game, per se, but it was just the whatever Saturday afternoon random movie, and they would put a still card shot up before and after each commercial break.
Yeah, the parody of real life. It's just a step past what they would actually put on movies for, and it's great.
Absolutely, yeah. Richie alluded to it earlier in my introduction, and he tossed it back to me, but Lisa asks her father, "Hey, what's a Muppet?"
Well, it's not quite a mop, and it's not quite a puppet, but man... So to answer your question, I don't know.
But then Bart notices one particularly leathery Muppet. That's not a Muppet.
That's not a...
Go ahead, Rich.
Go ahead, Rich.
Strike two! Daniel's
We'll get there.
He's not working with these amateurs any longer.
Yeah, that's right.
That's not a leather Muppet. That's Troy McClure. Back in the 70s, he was quite a teen heartthrob.
Yeah, who'd have thought he'd turn out to be such a weirdo?
Homer goes on to explain that he has some bizarre personal life things. You know, those weird things he says that he does down at the aquarium. Why, I heard...
Ooh, Homer, that's just an urban legend. People don't do that type of thing with fish.
The very beginning of many references to some sort of weird kink that Troy McClure apparently has with fish. This joke was actually very challenging for the Simpsons staff. They were trying to find something that came across as more funny than Icky, and it was really difficult to do. And it was actually James Brooks who came in with the idea that they should just kind of not really directly say what it is, but just allude to the fact that it's something at the aquarium and let people's mind wander on their own. And that's actually how this joke was created.
Boy, they just hit this joke over the head so many times.
Yeah.
And it's just insistent until later on they just finally come out and say it. And I don't know, I think there's something so funny about that where it's like, hey, we're committed to this and we're going to keep hitting it in different ways.
Yeah, they reference it subtly and directly. Like, I love one of my favorite references is just the fact that at Troy McClure's house that we'll see later, there are fish everywhere.
Right, his bed is around a huge aquarium.
Yeah, and they never really mention it. It's just there that whole time that you're in the house.
Even on the back of his car, you get the little reference.
Which his car, my God, my absolute dream vehicle is a DeLorean, of course, souped up to look like it's from Back to the Future. But I just absolutely love that Troy McClure drives a DeLorean. And better yet, when he gets pulled over for reckless driving, it would seem, he's swerving around and bumping and crashing into a lot of things. And Wiggum, of course, pulls him over. And when he opens the door, it's those traditional wing doors that rise up, and it just clocks Wiggum right in the jaw. Good stuff.
To jump back briefly to Muppets Go Medieval, do you guys happen to know who was doing the Piggy and Kermit voices? Because I'd like to give props to both of them. Especially the Miss Piggy impression. Whoever was reading for that, it's a pretty darn good Miss Piggy impression.
I don't have that information specifically on who did the voices, but for my usual rule of thumb is when in doubt, assume it's Hank Azaria.
It's fair. It's fair. Because the one, yeah, it's kind of like the Kermit voice that everyone can do, but it's harder to find a good Miss Piggy impression, and they get it, you know.
Just like she was getting it from Troy.
Exactly.
Nice. So Wiggum pulls Troy McClure over. All right, Captain Rush, out of the car. And then when he gets hit in the face, ow, I'm seeing stars here.
No, just one. Hi, I'm Troy McClure. You may remember me from such films as The Greatest Story Ever Hulaed and They Came to Bungle Carnegie Hall. To burgle Carnegie Hall.
What a bungle. Yeah.
So we learn when Troy hands his license over that he's actually supposed to be wearing corrective lenses, but Troy points out, you wouldn't ask a handsome man like me to wear glasses. It'd be a crime against nature. And Wiggum actually agrees, because when Troy puts his glasses on, it's not the same movie star-esque face that we're used to. He turns into a total nerdlinger. So Wiggum tells him that he should go down to the DMV and try to pass that eye test, and he'll just tear up the ticket in the meantime.
But he's still going to ask for a bribe.
Yeah, he's still going to ask for a bribe.
Of course, you got to ask for a bribe. How else you going to make money?
Just the look on Troy McClure's face in that scene always, it's funnier than the line to me, where he's relieved and happy that he's going to get off with a warning, and then just the subtle disappointment and immediately reaching for his wallet. Just, he's so resigned when he's asked for the bribe.
Looks like he's done it so many times before. Yeah.
And I feel you already said they wanted to do this episode to give Phil Hartman more of a leading role. Thank them for that, because he deserves it. Any of his characters, whenever his voice, I mean, to some extent John Lovitz too, but just such great voice acting as side characters, and it's a gift to us, the audience, that we get an episode featuring one of his characters.
Well, and not to go too dark here, but we're in season 7, and Troy McClure's last episode is like the second or third episode of season 10. So it's one of those that I'm glad they did it while they had the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Again, not trying to be dark or grim, but it's just this is absolutely a special episode, and it's mostly on the merit. I mean, the Simpsons staff in general is obviously insanely talented, but I think this episode specifically shines the way it does because of the merits of Phil Hartman.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, we can talk all day about Golden Age and where that ends and what's the cutoff. But generally, it's just, I feel like a bit of the Simpsons magic goes away when we don't have Phil Hartman there anymore.
I can't agree more. I love the character of Gil, and I think he's fantastic, but that was their attempt at a replacement, and you just can't replace a Phil Hartman. It can't be done.
To his credit, though, Billy West's interpretation of how Phil Hartman might read for Zap Brannigan does a pretty good tribute.
Agreed. Yeah, and Billy West is also another one of those on the top of, in terms of voice actors, he might be at the top. I don't know.
Yeah, pretty darn close.
I actually love in this episode the dialogue between Jeff Goldblum and Phil Hartman. Like, I think those quick little moments are fantastic. I love hearing them talk back and forth.
Oh, for sure.
Since you bring up Goldblum, I'll go ahead and say this was a really, really special commentary because it featured the voices of Josh Weinstein and Bill Oakley, the showrunners, the director, David Silverman, and Jeff Goldblum, who played Agent Parker in this one. And it was just so refreshing and unique to get an opportunity to hear somebody on the level of Jeff Goldblum, who is a legitimately big Simpsons fan. Like, you can tell when he's talking about the show how much he really cares and knows these characters. It's not just like he's like, oh, yeah, am I getting paid for this? Or, you know, what time's lunch? It's like he's passionately excited to talk about his role on The Simpsons, and I definitely have more to say about him, especially when we meet his character. But it was just such a fun and unique commentary to get to experience. Not all the commentaries are educational and often very, very enjoyable, but sometimes they do these little things that just make them stand out in a special way, and this was no exception.
I'll have to go and listen to that. I don't listen to the commentaries on these as much as I probably should, with as much as I like the show. But I did want to say, I love the fact that Jeff Goldblum is not playing himself. And that's another thing that I feel really separates some of these older episodes from some of the newer ones, is that the celebrity guest stars would play characters, or at the very least, they would play themselves in a fun way, with a dumb twist on it, or just making fun at themselves.
I think exactly what you said. I think a great example of that, and it's just, since it's currently in the news as we air this, it's going to be like a month old by the time, or as we record this, it'll be like a month old by the time we air it, but Luke Perry just passed away, and he played a amazing guest spot on The Simpsons, where he technically played himself, but it's exactly like you were just talking about, where he put such a zany, silly twist and was willing to clown himself. Like, willing
sideshow
to
Luke Perry.
Accept. Exactly. Yeah, willing to accept that this is a comedy show and that it's funny to roast yourself a little bit. But I agree. I think that Goldblum playing a character that has really nothing to do with Goldblum is perfect for this episode.
And I mean, it's just more reminiscent of episodes like Lisa's Substitute, where it's just like, you know, let this person who's a talented actor play a character other than themselves, because they definitely can.
I have to assume for actors, too, that's a more fun opportunity. To me, I think it would be a lot more fun to play a character than to play yourself.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, I'm playing myself? Oh, okay. Cool, I get this new character to develop real quickly. Yeah, that sounds like a lot more fun.
Never have to be in the studio saying, like, I would never say that.
It's just like, you get into this trend of the people just playing themselves, and it's just, oh, yes, I know their name, and I know who they are. That's comedy, right? I was talking about this just the other day, and just, poke some fun at yourselves. Like, even when George Harrison was in the Barbershop episode, he barely had any lines, but he had that fun "It's been done" line when they're on top of Moe's. And we were talking about it and remembering how we couldn't get over how funny the oh my God, where did you get that brownie? And, they have a whole lot of them over there. And then just, wow, what a nice guy. Just like a quick, subtle joke.
Well, speaking of quick, subtle jokes, this one isn't
thank
one,
you.
because we see at the DMV, Troy McClure walks in, and we see Tony, the mobster, and his mobster buddies, and Louis actually says, "Hey, I thought you said Troy McClure was dead."
No, what I said was he sleeps with the fishes. You see,
And they once again hammer it over. Immediately, Louis is like, "Oh, Tony, please, no, I just ate a whole plate of digamago. Dimagagu, I don't know."
Gabagool, generic Italian.
Perfect. One really quick note on this too, though. This is actually the one and only time in the Simpsons history that Joe Mantegna does not play Fat Tony.
I wanted to ask about that because it did not sound like him at all, and it just completely threw me off, and I don't think I ever would have noticed this before us doing this podcast.
Joe Mantegna has famously said how much he enjoys doing the character and even requests to be called in, even if it's only for one quick line. But just for this specific episode, they just were not able to make the schedules meet, so they had to take care of it otherwise.
I did not know the other mobster's name was Louis, so that's a fault on me. Not as big of a Simpsons fan as I thought.
Or you're not holding a copy of the script in your hand.
Yeah, that's probably it. I always think it's Clamps because he's the same character.
Get the clamps.
Well, what's the other mobster's name?
Oh man, in Futurama, it's Joey Mousepad.
I think it's Legs in The Simpsons.
That makes sense. We see Troy walks in without his glasses and immediately turns to Selma. "Ah, hello, beautiful. John Law tells me I might need to wear these glasses." And this is actually great animation because as we see the perspective of Troy looking at Selma without his glasses, we get what basically are the equivalent of beer goggles Selma. But it's a really, really great animation where they actually do a good job of keeping it where you can still tell it's the Selma model, but they just took away a lot of her less flattering features.
Like the hair?
But yeah, whenever he puts on his glasses, he suddenly sees the errors of his way, but he still tries to save it.
This would be the second time that we've seen Beer Goggle Selma, I believe, right? After
oh, you're right.
Selma's Choice.
Yeah, Bart sees her after being at the theme park, and I can't remember what he drinks, but he sees something.
He doesn't
puts
drink
beer
any-
goggles on.
That's right. That's right. He actually puts novelty beer goggles on. You're totally right. I forgot about that. Damn it, we're gonna have to go back and re-review that episode now.
What I like is the whole fact that the purpose of Troy being here is to have his eyes checked, and like literally immediately has a situation he should be wearing corrective lenses.
Yeah. Well, and he really should, because when he's given his eye test, he's supposed to be reading this chart, and it's like, W7 star pound? And obviously those are symbols that are not on an eye chart. But Troy points out, if you could find it in your heart to pass me, I'm sure I could find some way to repay you, say by buying you dinner.
Oh.
And immediately we see the stamp of approval going down.
Multiple times.
And
that took a lot of class.
That's one of my favorite Phil Hartman deliveries in this episode. It's so, I don't know the word for it. It flows out so smoothly. It's velvety, where it's just, that took a lot of class. And it's just, I don't know. He plays such an asshole in this episode. Like, he does not treat Selma well at all, except for maybe a few moments, but
what do
that
you mean,
sort
baby?
of...
All marriages are a sham. Ours is just more obvious about it. We'll get that line later.
Yeah, I mean, he's such a blowhole?
Yeah, he's a bull. There you go. Wow, we did it.
There. End of the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next week.
Yes. We also get probably my favorite Troy McClure film in this episode mentioned in this is the Give My Remains to Broadway. Where I feel like, yes, they wanted to do an episode for Phil Hartman, but I also feel like they had a bunch of Troy McClure movie titles in the backup that they wanted to just get out.
It was just filling up room on their idea board, and they're like, all right, we gotta get these out of here. Purge the joke board.
But you know that's where they had the most fun too, is coming up with those titles. Like, let's just pitch crazy titles for Troy McClure, and I would always save a whole bunch of extra funny ones for future episodes.
Oh, for sure.
What I liked is that he mispronounces Bouvier too when he's looking at their name. Like, I don't know why, that just stands out to me. Miss Bouvier.
Well, we do actually see that Troy and Selma do go on a date, and when they get there, there's actually a bunch of celebrity photos on the wall, like we mentioned earlier. One quick note here is there's actually a small nod. Not only is Jub Jub featured in this episode, as Daniel already pointed out, but there's also one of the celebrity pictures on the wall is, in fact, Conan O'Brien. Just a little homage to their former writing friend there. Troy McClure is also there, but not really on the wall as much as the doggy door.
This is at the Pimento Grove.
Right. A fancy, very chic restaurant.
It seemed like a lot of the pictures on the wall were former guest stars on the show. Like, I was trying... I don't know. It was just more than one or two. There was a whole bunch of people I feel like we've seen.
I definitely spotted Tito Puente.
Yes.
On my rewatch. So I'd be surprised if it was a minority of them on the wall, where I feel like most of them ought to be recurring guest stars.
That makes sense.
Probably true, yeah.
Giving a nod to the people that have supported the show in the past. Makes total sense.
I definitely saw John Swartzwelder on the wall.
Oh, was he there? I missed that one. He was not there for the commentary track for some reason.
Oh.
There's a little bit of dialogue at the date that I really enjoy. Troy's trying to strike up conversation. Oh, so working at the DMV must be interesting.
I think I'm getting repetitive stress disorder from my scratching my butt all day. Being a huge movie star must be good too. What are you working on now?
And Troy has a good point here. He's been reading a lot of scripts lately because, it's cheaper than going to the movies.
Is it this day? The later date where they have the line, that's never heard such a funny anecdote. Am I jumping ahead?
I think that's the next one. Yeah.
Okay, pardon me.
I think that's the next one after he's starting to ham it up for the I almost said the mafia. I didn't mean that. What are those people with the cameras?
Paparazzi.
Thank
that's
you.
It. Yeah.
Mafia with cameras.
Exactly.
The camera mafia.
Yes.
You got it. That's funny. So when it comes to be the end of the date, Selma's just kind of like, oh, well, thanks for holding up your end of the bargain. And it's just kind of...
I had a pretty okay time.
Me too. You need a ride somewhere?
Yeah.
And that's when we see that the reporters are starting to notice that he's dating someone. So he decides to give him a little taste for page 1 by pecking Selma on the cheek.
And she's really, really happy too.
The next day, we actually see that it's printed on page 10, however, of the Springfield Shopper.
Right next to the crossword.
And I believe that's a free publication.
Oh,
probably.
Right.
But it does notice, at least in, Homer's circle, because Lenny asked about it, and Homer, I love his response. Troy McClure, he's a washed-up movie star. He should be dating washed-up supermodels.
But I love how they tie in the thing again, because Lenny instantly connects the dots the way that Troy would be planning on it happening, where he says, "Oh, I don't know. Maybe those rumors about his fish fetish weren't all true after all."
And even Carl points out that this changes everything. I'd pay to see him in a movie now.
If only that were possible. And cut immediately to Jeff Goldblum's character pretty soon, right?
Yep. We do. Actually, though, before we get to him, we see that he is calling Troy McClure from Troy McClure's home. And I do just really quickly want to talk about his house, because that is based on the real-life LA home known as the Chemosphere, which was built in 1960. It's a 2,200 square foot living space. It's a circular. It's very similar to the way it's depicted in The Simpsons, actually, the real-life building is. And what's fascinating about it is at the time that it was built, the person that bought the land is at such a severe slope, they thought that it was absolutely impossible to be able to build anything on it. But they came up with this very smart idea, and they buried this huge anchor into the ground, built a pole coming out of this 45-degree angle on this hill, and then actually built this sky rise, essentially poking up over the tree line. What's really interesting about this is it's shown in The Simpsons as being pretty run down, and in 1996, it's because it actually was really starting to wear out at that time. Though, considering that it's in California and it's actually withstood lots of weather, including weather and also earthquake conditions. It survived multiple earthquakes, and the fact that it's still standing at all is pretty impressive. And even as of today, it is in fact not only still there, but it's been renovated, and now it's back up to what it once was, or probably even better.
It always reminds me of Lethal Weapon 2, where they like pull the beam out from under the house and have it slide down the hill. I don't know why, my mind instantly goes there.
The only thing on that is it was $140,000 when it was built in 1960, which would be the modern day equivalent of about $1.2 million today.
Jeez.
Not bad for something so ultra modern.
But Troy McClure is hanging out at his fancy chemosphere-like home when he receives a call from his agent, MacArthur Parker, who we previously mentioned is in fact played by Jeff Goldblum.
He interrupts Troy reading beanbag furniture repair.
And MacArthur Parker is, in fact, based on a real-life agent in Hollywood who is apparently a complete and total sleazeball. They refuse...
Ari Gold?
Goldblum actually made the joke on the commentary that he thinks that Ari Gold may have studied this episode when preparing for Entourage.
There you go.
That's awesome.
But they refused to name the actual agent because they didn't want to give him any of the credit, but they said basically anybody who works in Hollywood probably knows who they're referencing.
Wow.
And I like just the throwaway naming him after the song MacArthur Park.
Yeah.
Just for no apparent reason whatsoever.
Just, it sounded good and kind of rhymed a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works out well.
We've got Troy's line where it's like, MacArthur Parker, the agent? MacArthur Parker, my agent? Or
just checking in on my friend, so how's my favorite client?
We haven't spoken in 8 years.
Yeah, but I saw the papers today, Troy, looking good. I love that. That is just absolutely how it works. You're forgotten until you're hot again, sort of thing. And these.
But you haven't found me in 12 years, Miles.
You know what? Jury duty is work, Richie.
It's just to continue fantastic delivery from Hartman throughout. Just lovely voice acting.
I think both Hartman and Jeff Goldblum work so well in this together. It's really just a great scene. Anytime these two are together, it feels sleazy, but they do a good job of like making it fun and poking enough fun at it that it doesn't come off as entirely sleazy. The characters are sleazy.
I think that's the way to put it, because as I mentioned, Troy McClure in this episode is not a nice guy. He's an asshole, but he's still endearing because he can't get away from how great Phil Hartman's voice is.
Yeah. And as long as as long as Troy McClure is continued to be seen with human females, he'll continue to get work in the entertainment industry.
And I ham-fisted that line is I can continue to get you work in the entertainment industry.
Yes.
Where else?
So Jeff Goldblum, we mentioned just a big time fan of the show, and you can really tell he's passionate when he's discussing it on the episode. It was 10 years removed when they did the commentary, so they themselves, like as they were discussing it, were kind of discovering some of their memories of the time, which is also really fascinating to listen to. But one of the things that both Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein said is that a lot of times when they have guest stars, they feel it's their job to do everything they can to make the guest star feel comfortable when they arrive. But Jeff Goldblum was just such a chill and nice dude. He came in and he was immediately relaxed to the point that he made the rest of the staff feel comfortable. So there was like this odd role reversal for working on this episode.
I can see him doing that too.
Expect nothing less from Jeff Goldblum.
I assume he was shirtless the entire
I was
time
going to
he
say.
Recline.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
And very, very oiled up. So we see that Troy and Selma are going to continue to date. This is actually where we get the line that you referenced earlier where he says, "Oh, that's too funny. I can't remember when I've heard a funnier anecdote." All right, now you tell one.
I also like
Such
right
a,
before when
yeah,
he says,
such a great line.
I also like before when he says, you may remember me from such dates as last night's dinner."
Yes. When he's calling her on the phone.
Yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, there becomes an awkward moment when the date is seemingly going really, really well until Selma lights up a cigarette and the manager comes over and says, "Please don't smoke in our restaurant. We don't serve contemporary Californian cuisine in your lungs."
Excuse me, I ordered a Zima, not emphysema.
So this is an example of how very, very different the times are in television in the 90s versus not only television of today, but even when they were recording the commentary a decade after this episode aired, because this was 1996 when you could still see people smoking on TV, which is almost non-existent nowadays. But not only that, they mentioned that even in the writer's room at this time, specifically Schwartzwelder and sometimes other writers would actually smoke in the office. And it was not considered a faux pas or anything. It was completely just normalized at that time. Versus, during the time that they were recording the commentary, there was actually a bill on the books in California that was being voted on that essentially, I don't think it actually got passed, but they were essentially trying to outlaw people smoking in their own vehicles, even if they were by themselves, because the smell and whatnot could the secondhand smoke could essentially bother other drivers on the road.
Wow.
The mid 90s was a rough times.
Very true, very true. Selma is mortified. She thinks she's ruined everything. She's embarrassed herself. She literally goes out to both cry and continue to smoke in the parking lots, like you do. But this is actually like an oddly sweet moment from Troy McClure, even though it has nefarious means, and we know that, just the way it's drawn and presented. Troy comes out to the parking lot and he has a cigar and essentially asks her for a light. And
got a light?
And like I said, it just comes off in this. It's an oddly sweet moment for this episode.
Right. Because, I mean, you kind of get the sense Troy McClure's not all bad. He's, sort of an egomaniac and willing to do that. Don't get me wrong, he's an asshole. He's a bad guy. But that's not to say he's not without moments of, because you get the sense he's been living in this apartment by himself except for his fish. He didn't get a whole lot of human companionship.
Good point. So they continue to actually kind of bond over their habit of smoking. Selma even points out that smoke actually smells good when it's coming out of Troy. And when she runs out of cigarettes, Troy offers her one of his cigars.
My God, it's like 5 cigarettes at once. Oh, my head is swimming.
That's not cigars, baby. That's love.
I love this shot.
Yes, they're of course in the drive-in theater, and it's a line that I really like. It's like, "Come on, there's a late screening of my latest movie," and it's the Muppets Go Medieval,
which is Rain Delay Theater at the moment on TV.
Which tonight is showing the Muppets Go Medieval, but Saturday will be closed for demolition, according to their sign out front.
But I love the shot where you see the screen inside the car looking in between Troy and Selma at the movie screen, and as Troy's saying his lines, he's literally repeating the lines from the movie to Selma at the exact same time. Like, I just love that shot. It's so cool looking.
Selma then is unwittingly playing the part of Miss Piggy.
Yes.
And imitating her lines at the same time, too.
It's so awesome.
And then they actually end that scene when Troy leans in for a kiss. And I love this, too, because Troy's like, "Just a second, baby." And he pulls out a thing of breath freshener that you'd think that he might spray in his own mouth, but there's a nice flip here when he turns it around and sprays it in hers and then goes on kissing.
Miles, you
good
forgot
long spray too.
It's a full-on misting.
You forgot the most important part, Miles. It wasn't the kiss; it was that he proposed to her.
Oh, he actually slips the ring? I did. I totally just skipped over that. They're kissing, and he actually proposes in this moment. And that is actually how we end our first act. We come back for our second act with kind of jumping out of order, I guess. They often start these shows with the kids watching TV, but we start the second act now, also with the TV watching, which, as we've learned from talking with some of the show's creators, that's just a useful trick that they have to be able to manipulate the timing of the episode, and this one actually needed a lot of trimming, so it might be why they ended up doing a kind of I would almost say that they went over a brief summary of what was going on in the form of this Entertainment Tonight program.
Well, I mean, and they started the episode watching TV too.
Right.
So they're using that a lot here.
They're going to it. And I mean, it works though, because it makes sense that the Simpsons, they do spend a lot of time watching television.
For sure.
We see that Selma is moving into Troy's home, and this is where we get the infamous return of Daniel's all-time favorite Simpsons character, Jub.
I'd say Simpsons side character. You know what? Yeah, let's go for it. All-time, officially, top character on The Simpsons. Come and fight me about it, Jub.
If that trading card legit does exist out there anywhere, someone please send it to Daniel. That would just make my heart grow.
Let me provide my address right now. So, yeah, this introduction of Jub, Selma's moving in to the apartment, the ultra-modern, but dilapidated apartment. And it's just, Selma, Jub is fantastic. He's everywhere you want to be.
They pointed out that that's the slogan for Visa, and they have no idea why they thought that was funny.
I think it's hilarious.
I do too, but they call themselves out on it in the commentary.
I do not currently have any tattoos, but I have thoroughly considered getting a tattoo of Troy McClure holding Jub.
Oh, that would be a cool tattoo, yeah.
Where I don't know, it's the confidence behind he's everywhere you want to be. And then he immediately just uses the same adjective with like, check it out, baby, it's fantastic. It's
like his go-to, he just leans on that word.
Yes.
Also got with the news anchors talking to each other beforehand too, another fish joke where they do he's finally met the woman of his dreams. We may remember woman, huh? Okay. And then I like when the other Entertainment Tonight reporter talks about the high profile romance and it's going to shake all the rumors and he's getting all these roles, and then the guy goes, looks like you were wrong when you called him a washed up deviant, eh, Lori? So his plan is working, is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
And they do a good job of painting that picture that, like, every time we see an interaction with Selma and Troy, they kind of, it almost like climbing a rung of a ladder parallel to each other. Like, every step is, like, we see the move he makes with his pseudo relationship and the way that it immediately pays off in the media.
Yes.
So much so that when we see Troy actually leave for the night, because, of course, she'll be staying in the bedroom, Selma will be. He's going to be staying in the guest visitor center downstairs. But don't worry, I'll see you at tennis, or I'll see you in the morning for tennis. It comes on at 10.
Wink.
That's when we see Troy takes another call from his famous agent Parker, and he's immediately asked, you ever hear of Planet of the Apes?
For the planet.
The brand new multi-million-dollar musical, and you're starring as the human.
And this is like real classic Jeff Goldblum delivery on that one too, because there's so much, I don't know, tension that he builds with his weird, erratic Jeff Goldblum pauses.
Yes.
It's the multi-million-dollar musical, and you're starring as the human. It's just like a weird read, but
it's
totally
the part he was born to play, baby.
Yeah, part he was born to play, baby.
We're definitely going to sing this song because we wouldn't be able to do this episode without it. But before we jump into it, I do want to say that it was actually Josh Weinstein who came up with the idea for the Dr. Zaius song, despite the fact that he had not seen Planet of the Apes at the time that this episode was created.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No context.
Because
it was actually in his mind just a parody of the song Rock Me Amadeus, and he knew the character, but he had never actually he wasn't familiar with the movie other than just kind of through pop culture references.
And it kind of sets it apart because you see an awful lot of these Simpsons songs are mostly original pieces, whereas this one does lean very heavily on Rock Me Amadeus. But that the vaudevillian dumb bits in between it just really sell it for me.
And that was a George Meyer contribution. He actually, again, Weinstein didn't really know the source material, so there was a team collaboration that helped to complete this song and make it the full production that we see. Stop the Planet of the Apes, I Want to Get Off.
Yep. Title alone still gets a chuckle out of me, and I've seen this episode I don't know how many times. And it's just, especially with all the dumb musical gimmicks that they make fun of, the big kick line at the end, the vaudeville bits in between, followed up with Homer's, "Ooh, I love legitimate theater."
And even Bart is like, this play has everything!
Yeah.
And of course, though, Daniel, this was the part you were born to play, baby.
Oh, of course.
Help! The human's about to escape!
Get your paws off me, you dirty ape!
He can talk!
He can talk.
Let's see if I can hit this note.
He can talk. He can talk.
I can sing!
Oh, help me, Dr. Zaius! Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius.
The dumb.
Dr. Zaius,
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Zaius. Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius. Oh, Dr. Zaius.
Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius.
What's wrong with me?
Think you're crazy.
Want a second opinion?
You're also lazy. Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius. Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius. Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius. Oh, Dr. Zaius.
Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius.
Can I play the piano anymore?
Of course you can.
Well, I couldn't before.
And this, we cut to a piano interlude, and this is where we actually see Homer and Bart both just absolutely enamored with this play, and just like it's the best musical that they've ever seen. But that's when Troy slows things down just a little bit.
If I may make a quick comment, once again, just fun animation choices. The display of like mock shock on Dr. Zaius' face when Homer takes his piano solo, I think is really funny. Somehow they managed to sell this actor hamming up over surprise, and go freeze frame on that face sometime. It's worth it.
I like the breakdancing ape too. The breakdancing ape gets me every time.
Yes.
And to Daniel's point, it's not just like an actor, a human actor with like a shocked expression. It's an animated human actor in ape makeup that's still like is showing so much emotion and shock in this one freeze frame moment. But that, of course, leads us to probably the most iconic line of the episode.
Do I have to take this one too?
You get to take this one too, sir.
Okay. Pure acapella. I do my best work. I hate every ape I see, from chimpanzee to chimpanzee. Oh, you'll never make a monkey out of me. Oh my God, I was wrong. It was Earth all along. You finally made a monkey.
Yes, we finally made a monkey.
Yes, you finally made a monkey out of me. I love you, Dr. Zaius.
Daniel, you legit brought a fucking tear to my eyes, sir. That was
awesome,
beautiful, man. I'm blown
now
away.
You must do every Simpsons song with us from now until the end of time.
Right.
Yeah, we're calling you in. Yeah, you're our new contractually obligated singer,
but not contractually paid.
I didn't get all the way through David's episode. I listened to some of it. Sorry, David. I'll finish it later. Did he mention his absurd and violent love for Sold Separately from Homer versus Dignity?
No, he didn't bring that up.
That comes later in, season 12 or something?
We only briefly touched on that one. In fact, it was actually Chris Hansen, another comedian from Dallas Comedy House, joined us for Homer the Smithers, which is very, very connected to that episode.
David and I love the Sold Separately, which is, of course, the Malibu Stacy musical that Waylon Smithers writes and goes and stars in out in New Mexico. And when we were writing our horror movie musicals, we wrote Jason, a musical about Jason Voorhees, and then the spin-off sequel, Freddy, a devilish musical, about Freddy Krueger. We always joked that we would never write anything better than Sold Separately.
That bar is set high, my friend.
I do want to touch base on the songs because I know we all had. I thought from the top of the podcast we all had a little personal story with these songs. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are two of the songs I think I've sung the most out of the entirety of The Simpsons, and particularly my father absolutely loved Dr. Zaius, and so much so that back in it was either the 90s or early 2000s, there was a Texas Ranger baseball player named Luis Alicea, and every time he would come up to bat, whether we were watching at home or at the actual game in front of thousands of people, we would sing Dr. Zaius, except say Alicea, Alicea the whole time. Yeah, just one of those stupid little memories, but it's like the most meaningful of memories at the same time because it was just always a hoot to do that. And playing video games of baseball, whenever he'd come up, we'd do the exact same thing.
Well, I mean, it's like a sweet connection that you have with your dad that's also Simpsons-esque related. I mean, obviously, it came directly from there, even though you just altered it.
Miles, did you also bond with your father through The Simpsons? If so, that's all three of us.
I wish I knew my father. No, I'm kidding.
My dad and I would huddle around the TV every day to watch The Simpsons. There was never an issue of should Richie be watching this. It was always I'm going to watch it with him. And he knew instantly that it was a smart show. So
my dad and I watched The Simpsons together, but not like traditionally or like on a regular basis. But it was one of those things that my dad growing up, like the only thing I ever remember my dad watching was the news. Like that was it. When the History Channel came and we got like satellite, he would watch like History Channel shit in the news. But a lot of times he would make fun of me for the various entertainment that I'd shows. Like he ridiculed me for enjoying wrestling, to be honest. But The Simpsons was one of those shows that when I would turn it on, he wouldn't complain. And, like sometimes he might jab about like, I'm too old to be watching cartoons. I'm like, Dad, I'm 7. No, he would actually like sit there and chuckle quite a bit. And I don't think my dad would be described as a Simpsons super fan by any stretch of the imagination.
He probably enjoyed all the political commentary, like with those jokers in Congress.
I think that he very much enjoyed the political humor. Absolutely. And I think that, like you said, it is a smart show. So there is humor that's there for a lot of different people. Like it doesn't pigeonhole itself into one target audience. I think The Simpsons they talk about how even though they might have their own political beliefs, anytime they do tackle anything that's even pseudo-political, they try to make sure to do it fair and balanced. Like a great example of that is when they have that wonderful parody, or not parody, I'm sorry, where Bart gets an elephant and it goes running through both the Democratic National Convention and the Republican National Convention.
Yeah.
It's like, I think we're actually evil, and the other one is like, we're too dumb to govern, we're too something to govern ourselves. Like they always make sure to attack both sides in a very fun way.
I think Citizen Kang is an excellent example of that too, and it's one of my favorite Treehouse of Horror segments because of that.
I think that's the next Treehouse of Horror that we're going to have the pleasure of reviewing. And
pardon me for talking ahead then.
One. No, that's absolutely okay. That's one of my favorite as well. And I haven't watched that one in quite a while, so I'm curious to see how it holds up. But a lot of times we find that The Simpsons, the way they write their episodes, they not only stay relevant for a really long time, sometimes they're downright ahead of their time in that they become more relevant in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little more dated just because it's based around a specific presidential election. Bill Clinton versus Bob Dole isn't exactly on the forefront of everyone's minds, but some of the jokes in that episode hold up very, very well.
I'm jaded as fuck, but I still stand by the whole you have to vote for one of us is more true than people actually realize.
Go ahead, throw your vote away.
I don't know, I always enjoy we're always twirling. I say that almost on a daily basis and nobody has any idea what I'm talking about.
Tuning in to our episode covering Citizen Kang, we're going to continue on.
This is like a weird edit that it just got two episodes spliced together somehow. Our fault. Back to Fish Called Selma. We see that the Simpsons family is actually visiting at the McClure household now, which they have a pool, which is really cool. One neat thing, just an observation from the commentary. This is one of the few times you see Maggie Simpson in a different outfit than her normal little blue onesie thing. She's actually wearing a child swimsuit. Selma is modeled in this time to look as much like Marilyn Monroe, at least like her fashion style. That was what they were going for, is they wanted her to have like a Marilyn Monroe feel. I think
Beauty mark.
Possibly my favorite joke in the episode is when Selma is really, really hammering in about how, talking to her sister Marge, remember when we were kids, we used to dream about our ideal husbands? Who knew the dream would come true for one of us? Marge looks so disappointed, and Selma just keeps poking. Oh, come on, guess which one?
I know, it's Selma, right?
And that is, of course, Homer coming from the swimming pool.
We also have, second to give my remains to Broadway, the Lisa's point of reference for Troy McClure. I wrote this one down so I wouldn't forget it, was the Fish locker room towel fight, the blinding of Larry Driscoll.
The dangers of the locker room, for real.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I feel like they just had a backlog of these that they just dumped all of them out in this episode.
I mean, that really does make sense. Like, they were just so piled up. And I imagine this was probably because of how much everybody talks about how they adore Phil Hartman. And
yeah,
they probably really enjoyed writing for him. I imagine it was almost a fight sometimes where it's like, no, I want to write these lines. It's because he is such a unique and talented voice actor, and his characters on the show are both two of the most prominent, especially at this time, probably the top two most popular recurring guest stars that they have.
Oh, for sure.
They do continue on. We actually see that the family continues to bond. Specifically, Homer takes out Troy to Moe's, which is just kind of a funny scene to see Troy McClure, who we're used to seeing in these ritzy settings, having a beer at Moe's. This sequence was actually heavily, heavily cut. There was actually a very long bachelor party scene that took place before we got to this scene where that's why you notice that they're already pretty drunk by the time we meet up with them. They cut out basically all of the bachelor party for time and just cut right to the meat of it, where we learn that Troy, in his drunken state, admits to Homer that this whole wedding thing is just a sham. It's all for his career.
And Homer had a movie idea about World War II and Dracula, which Troy should have took him up on both of those.
Well, I mean, I think they've already made some movies about World War II.
I think they've made a lot more after 1996.
I don't think we hear the specifics. Like, we know that is what Troy McClure tells Homer, but I think that he just whispers and then laughs when he's telling Homer about the sham
You're
marriage.
absolutely right. Troy whispers, and we just see Homer's reaction, which we think you can tell that Homer's disturbed by the information he hears, while Troy is just laughing about it. And then we almost immediately cut to the wedding, where we hear the Reverend essentially asking if there's anybody who wants to speak up because they have a reason that they should not be wed. And we cut to Homer, and we see him, a scene that we see a lot, where we hear Homer's internal thoughts. The expression on his face leads us to believe that he might be having a debate in his mind about what the right thing to do is. But in actuality, all we get is da 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 da. Hey, da 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 da. Hey, da 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 da.
It's one of many of those Homer's internal thoughts. My favorite one of those is probably the "What if I robbed the Quickie Mart" cutaway.
Oh my god! And then we see him driving away. Maybe next time.
Yeah.
I'm upset that we didn't get to see more of Troy and Homer together, or that we won't see more of that in the future, because they always do this thing with Homer whenever he's at Moe's with somebody where he's really getting along and it seems like he's bonding with somebody, and then they say or end up doing something terrible where it's like, man, it just seems like the characters of Troy and Homer could have some really crazy adventures or stories that could be told between the two of them, and it's like, it sucks that because of Troy being who he is, that will never happen.
That would have been one of those spin-off shows we see, on that future episode where we get a lot of various Simpsons spin-offs.
Yes. The Adventures of Troy and Homer.
Troy introducing a spin-off starring himself is very in character.
You might remember me from the show you're about to watch.
From such roles as Homer Simpson. Hey!
One kind of just another pointing out how sleazy of a person Troy McClure really is when Selma says to her new husband, "This is the best day of my life."
It's a good day for you, baby. Now smile. We're going to be on every newsstand in the country.
And that just goes, he's just, at this point, he's not even trying to hide it. He's just flat out pushing it in her face, and she's just too enamored with this movie star to realize that she's more or less being used.
Absolutely is.
We get Selma's full name at the marriage ceremony too, which is always a fun gag. The more that they have to add to it,
there's definitely a Terwilliger in there.
Yeah,
Terwilliger, excuse me.
We haven't even got to the possibility of Nahasapima Pedalon, which she won't do because of that.
True.
Right.
Later at the Simpsons home, that night specifically, we get what I think is the most disturbing scene in this episode when Homer points out that he was able to snag the candy bride and groom from the wedding cake. And the animation here is insane because Homer swallows this thing whole. It's not candy, spoiler alert. It's like a hard plastic or metal cake topper.
Probably
you
plastic.
See, though, the entire lump, the entire way down, and it just looks silhouette. So painful. And when he finally gets it down, you actually hear a little splash in his stomach. Pointy.
Just the level of detail they put into the animation there is what really sells that bit.
100%. 100%. Really meta joke here. Homer essentially lays it out on the line that it's time for bed, and he says, "Oh, that reminds me. Troy said something interesting last night at the bar. Apparently he really doesn't love Selma, and the marriage is just a sham to help his career. Well, enough talk."
Let's snuggle.
So anyway, quick recap of the episode so far.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, Marge acts like a normal human would with a, "What? Oh my god!" But Homer is off to sleep, and the line that just kills me is when he's like, "Marge, could you close your eyes? I'm trying to sleep." And of course, it's the classic cartoon bit where the lights are off and the only thing we can see are Marge's very bright, wide, white eyes.
But then he just goes, there.
And that actually...
I don't think that is a normal reaction, though, for what it's worth. I think a normal reaction would be Marge getting mad at Homer first for not saying anything sooner.
I don't know. I think surprise would be the first reaction and then anger. But That's debatable. Either way, it does bring us to the end of our second act. We'll be right back for Act 3 of A Fish Called Selma.
Hey guys, I'm here to talk about a serious problem today. One that can affect us all, but it's also a problem that can be fixed with everyone's help. I'm Richie the Whiz Kid, and I'm talking about podcasts. So many podcasts in the Somebodies Network need your help. They are being malnourished. Some are living in terribly harsh conditions, and some are Canadian. But with your help, a corner can be turned for these poor podcasts, especially in regards to Best Darn Diddly. You can go to popthreads.com and use the code Simpsons at checkout. Or you can buy Best Darn Diddly merch at tpublic.com. Most importantly, you can go to patreon.com/bestdarndiddly to donate now for as little as $1 a month. For less than 4 cents a day, you can bring a smile to these poor podcasters' faces. So let's work together to end the poverty of these podcasts. Let's be honest, you were probably just going to get a Krusty Burger with that dollar anyways. Cut to the pictures of starving podcasts.
We open the third act at the Aphrodite Inn, where we actually see Agent MacArthur Parker is reading the Springfield Shopper once again, and this time not page 10 news. Troy's wedding to a real-life human woman actually does in fact make the front page.
Did we mention MacArthur Parker's agency because it's Representations, a talent agency?
Not mentioned it, but yes, it's one of the many great background sign gags.
There are a lot of signs in this one. There's some movie posters we neglected to talk about earlier that went by really fast. Might get to them at the end, but this episode is littered with background jokes too, and just various things written on signs and backdrops.
And bumper stickers.
Yeah. We see that the agent MacArthur Parker is actually calling up Troy McClure, and he's like, "This better be important. It's my wedding night. I'm trying to sleep."
Yeah.
Sleep is for has-beens, my friends. You're about to have a very crowded schedule. This marriage scam is paying off big time. And I said they were on the phone, but it's actually Troy and the agent are actually at the bar themselves, so it's very clear the agent had called Troy to come meet him at the bar. Bartender actually has a call for him. He answers T. McC.
Yep.
That alone cracks me up. This is where it starts to get a little bit sad, though, honestly, because you can really see the real-life emotions of his real-life human wife with emotions saying, "Troy, darling, come back to bed. I want the Troy McClure I remember from such films as Makeout King of Montana and The Electric Gigolo."
Yeah, in a minute, darling. Ugh.
Click.
Well, she may be helping my career, but she's starting to cramp my stuff.
But Parker says who cares? Now that the offers are rolling in, he might even get in the new Paramount buddy cop movie with Rob Lowe and Hugh Grant.
Those sick freaks?
I don't know why I like that joke as much as I do either, but it's just funny that they just randomly throw shade at these two.
Yep. Why not? Middle of the episode, time to dunk on some people.
Make it rain, yeah. So we learned that there's actually going to be an opening for the sidekick in the new McBain movie. Brace yourself. It's called The New McBain Movie.
McBain's sidekick? Hot damn! I'm going to SeaWorld!
Not Disney World for some reason. Weird.
Who knows?
Did you know that earlier in the episode there was a magazine with Rainier Wolfcastle caption saying, "Look who's drunk." So he's been going through some stuff lately too.
Well, I mean, he's not in movie shooting shape yet. He's got, he'll clean up when it's time to shoot the sequel, the new McBain movie.
Could be the comeback story of the century.
Here's a fun fact. The reason he says I'm going to SeaWorld is it's a continuous...
Fuck fish. Oh, wait.
You know, the best jokes are the ones that you explain to death.
Yeah.
So, this is where the real confrontation of the episode hits, because the next time we see Troy and Selma, or I'm sorry, I should back up, that Marge actually tells Selma that Troy is just using her, and she, of course, just gets mad in the moment, but when we actually see Selma and Troy together, she puts it out on the line. Is this a sham marriage?
Sure, baby. Is that a problem?
You married me just to help your career?
You make it sound so sordid. Look, don't we have a good time together?
Yeah, but...
Don't you have everything you've ever wanted here? Money, security, a big, hot, flat rock for Jub Jub.
Yes, of course. That's
Every
all any of us
dream.
want.
I really like that they include Jub Jub once again, but finally Selma really asks the question she wants to know. But don't you love me?
Sure I do. Like I love Fresca. Isn't that enough? The only difference between our marriage and anyone else's is we know ours is a sham.
Dark. Dark.
Well, for the record, I have an issue with this line, Miles, because if I told you I love you like I love Diet Coke, I don't think I can get any higher on my love in that situation.
Yes, but you're an unusual creature, Richie. You have a thing for Diet Coke like Troy has a thing for fish.
He's sleeping with the
That's
Diet
right,
Coke.
that's what I'm trying to say.
But, I mean, they're empty cans.
They're empty inside?
They got tight hole. Ow.
I'm not going to take him out of my bed.
This is where we actually do just finally directly steer into the skid with this whole fish joke. When Selma asks Troy, "Are you gay?"
What's he call it? A romantic abnormality?
Gay? Yeah, it's gay. I wish. If I were gay, there'd be no problem. What I have is a romantic abnormality. One so unbelievable that it must be hidden from the public at all cost. And I love the shadowing they do.
Yeah,
here,
camera gets
Troy
much
is-
more dramatic and zooms in.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And this is actually a point in the script during the commentary that Jeff Goldblum speaks up and actually remembers at the time that they were recording this, he actually spoke up at one point and asked, like, what is the fish thing? Like, he was really wanting to know. And then finally they explained to him that they in their minds don't actually have anything. It was just left open for interpretation intentionally. But he got to the point where he actually just straight up asked, what is it that we're talking about here?
Like you wanted to know the step-by-step process, or
The fin by fin process.
So Troy goes on to explain to Selma that even though their marriage might be a sham, she's still going to be great. I mean, she's going to get to go places, or go to the right places, meet the right people. I mean, who would turn down such an offer? Sure, you'll be a sham wife, but you'll be the envy of every other sham wife in town.
And she does something I didn't think she would do from what we've seen in her past relationships, is she accepts.
She does. She seems to go along with it and just kind of acknowledges that, you know what, it might not be perfect, but it's better than nothing. And sure enough, we see her on Troy's arm as Troy is now getting his very own star in the Walk of Fame. In fact, replacing legendary actor Buster Keaton's star to just, really hammer home how big his return, like his meteoric rise to fame.
One of these days, Selma's going to have a star right next to mine.
So watch out, Laszlo Panaflex.
This is a deep cut, obscure reference, yeah?
So this is actually something we were talking about before you got on the call with us, Daniel. Please tell us what your knowledge of this joke is.
Oh, I don't know much about it. It's it was like the cinematographer. I almost said cinematographer, which sounds
very well-respected
delicious.
cinematographer. I want that job, actually.
Yeah,
I didn't know it until just now.
I want to die from having that job.
What is it, Laszlo Kofak?
Laszlo Panaflex.
Yeah, but I thought that it was named after the cinematographer Laszlo Kofax and like a camera company that was like Panaflex or Panafax or something.
So that's the same information that Richie also came across, but what I got from the director's commentary is they claim that this was just a completely absurd reference. And in fact, during the time of the commentary, they said that they Googled it, and in the 10 years past, a band had adopted it as a name, which there is a whole plethora of bands out there that have taken their name from, like, throwaway Simpsons lines. So that's not that shocking that somebody might have been like, oh, this is a cool thing to name our band. But so it's interesting. I would have to say that either the commentators did that and forgot, or it's just that they kind of accidentally stumbled upon a reference.
Let me say, a lot of improv comedy troupes have also taken their name from throwaway Simpson lines.
That makes total sense.
I would go with like some kind of Burnsism with all those old-timey words. That would be a good one.
Oh my god, yeah.
I know for a while in the area there was one called Hammock District, Fish Bulb. So, I mean, they pop up.
That's cool. So we see that the Entertainment Tonight man's back on the television, and they're going to answer the question that all of Hollywood is wondering. Who is going to be chosen to co-star as McBane's sidekick in McBane 4 Fatal Discharge? We see the phone rings, and it's Agent Parker talking to Troy once again. Troy is now desperate. Mac, you got to get me that part.
I will. You got to do something for me. Problem is, the big parts these days are all going to family men.
But I already got married.
Yeah, for a role like this, you gotta pour it on. You and your, wife, got a baby.
A baby, eh? What do I do?
I'll send you over a pamphlet. Listen, you can't buy that kind of PR, but you can get it for nothing by having a baby. Which, by the way, your insurance will cover, deductible, which I'll reimburse you for if you get the part, which you will if you have a baby.
Once again, just great read by Goldblum on that. It's
yes.
Such a great delivery.
They go on to say, when you are talking baby names, you can't use Montana, Dakota, or Florida because they're taken.
Oregon?
Pacific Northwest, very hot.
Oregon.
Yeah, that's...
We see that Troy is clearly mentioned this to Selma because she's pondering the idea of having a child and saying how big of a step that is, and Troy's trying to, justify it by saying it's not just the McBane movie. I mean, I might get my own fragrance.
Smelling of Troy.
Ellen of Troy.
The confidence behind that line and the dumb illusion. It's great.
Selma's actually legitimately contemplating this. I mean, she thinks it might be her last chance to be a mommy. And they're at dinner. A waiter comes by and offers her a cigarette. I love Troy's line here. You bet. From now on, she's smoking for two.
He clearly didn't read the pamphlet.
Yes.
Good point. There's actually a little bit of controversy at the table read, which is unusual for The Simpsons because they were doing the read for this episode, and a woman actually shouted out during the table read, which is almost unheard of. Like, that just doesn't happen. When people get the opportunity to, in fact, be at a table read, they almost never, they keep their mouth shut when the actors are going, but this was like some minor staff person. They didn't name her and they didn't say what exactly her position was, but it was nothing too major. But she actually stood up in protest of this line during the recording, during the table read of this episode, though they quickly dismissed her complaints when at the end of the episode, she also asked, "Who's Jub Jub?" And they realized that she's probably not part of the target audience.
How could she not know who Jub Jub is?
I love that was their justification for dismissing her complaint. They're just like, fuck it. If she doesn't know Jub Jub, then obviously she's not a fan of ours.
That's a true test, though, right?
Within character, yes. Outside of character, I'm not sure. Because, I mean, it's easy for us to justify it. Like, I think it makes the joke easier to swallow that Selma at this point is not yet pregnant, and Troy is just selling it to try to get the job. Like, she's not impregnated when she is, quote, two. But on the other hand, I will never have the opportunity to be pregnant, so I can't really speak on that note.
That's fair. I mean, you know what? Don't sell yourself out. Science might find a way before we die, but in current situation, you're absolutely right.
McBain 5 Junior.
I will also think that the joke also works because of how ignorant Troy is about the whole baby making process.
Exactly.
So just that kind of makes it so it's not as grim of a joke as it might otherwise be.
And sometimes on table reads, I mean, you're literally just reading the script, so you don't see the animation yet, and it might have been not quite obvious how stupid Troy is in that moment until you actually him doing it on the take with the animation.
Or not quite obvious that Selma was not yet pregnant. Yeah, I get it.
Sure.
So then they cut to them trying to make the baby, right?
They
Later
sure
that
do. And Troy seems so confused, which is very funny. Selma's like, come here, tiger. So Troy growls, but then immediately is just like, Selma suggests maybe they should have some wine. Troy absolutely agrees to the point where he actually drinks both glasses himself.
Love that. It looks like they're going to share a glass. He chugs one and chugs the other.
Or it's like he drinks it and then goes back across the room, right?
Rawr.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He approaches the bed and then leaves again. It almost turns into a little bit of a confrontation or an argument, because someone's like, why don't you come over here and make yourself more comfortable?
No, why don't you come over here and make yourself more comfortable?
And Troy's immediately like, I'm sorry, this whole concept's just foreign to me. Who knew a baby would be so much work?
It's just like, and he's so juvenile in this scene.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, he's downright does not understand this process, which is just hilarious to think about. But I mean, to be fair, I think previously all of his encounters were just one night stands, so maybe he didn't realize that like that without the condom is essentially the process.
Maybe, or all of his previous encounters were less human.
Fishy.
That's also a very good point. This could be his first interaction. Good point. So it all comes down to Selma having a realization in this moment that, you know, a loveless marriage is one thing because they're not hurting anybody, but a child is a whole different situation. Bringing that into a loveless family is just something she's not willing to do.
Oh, great. We'll adopt. I'll call my agent. He'll find some kid who wants in on the deal.
But this actually turns into a very somber moment, and something, again, The Simpsons does so well. It's one of their trademarks, because it's not just that they're funny, but they make you feel, and you really do feel for Selma here. As she says goodbye to her husband, she says, I'll always remember you, but not from your films. And she walks away slowly with Jub Jub, and there's really, like, soft music, kind of sad music playing. I do love the line. She says, come on, Jub Jub, let's go home and I'll microwave you some nice ribs.
And it's a real touching moment, and it's not just because of Jub Jub.
Who's Jub Jub?
Yeah. Hey, get out of here. It's one of those classic Simpsons moments, and sure, it doesn't rank up there with, you know, the do it for hers of the series, but it's those nice moments that can really set this apart. This episode in particular does a lot of work in making, you know, fleshing out Selma's character, because she does get some great character pieces throughout the run of the series. You know, she started as like Marge's sister who no one likes, but that want to be married and want to have a family kind of follows her throughout the series, which is a really nice thread for what could have just been a one-off joke side character.
You feel her as a human being. Like, you identify with what she's feeling. You feel her heartbreak, and it's so much more than just the kind of mean sister that we're used to, experiencing just through interactions with Marge.
Well, and the thing that makes you feel even more is Troy's reaction when she's actually walking away and you see him up in his window and how upset he is. Not that he's upset about the Selma part, but I don't know why for me, but seeing how upset he is really makes me feel for Selma even more because, like, I mean, she had everything except the most important thing for her, but I don't know. I just find that's dynamic to be very interesting moment there.
Yeah, I mean, and that final shot, I think, once again, I'm going to tread carefully into playing McClure's advocate here, where I think that...
You heard it here, folks. Daniel is justifying every action Troy McClure takes
That's
in this
right.
episode.
Go trout fishing in America.
I feel like if we were going to expound and read into the intentions behind the character, that I think that there is some of him who liked the companionship with Selma. He just was not romantically attracted to her, and also an egomaniac Hollywood star. But I digress. I feel like there's a part of him who is genuinely sad to see her walk away, not just because it means his career will suffer, but also because he will lose some companionship. At least I like to believe that.
Sure.
Well, I mean, remember that snowman ad they did together? I mean, it looked like they were having a lot of fun there.
Sure.
It looked like, yeah. I guess the Simpsons decided that they did not want to end this episode on such a down note because we do get after the credits start to roll sequence, very much like you might see in like an True Hollywood Story type of thing where you kind of see like what happens after this big story aired. We see that in a bold move that has stunned Hollywood insiders, newly divorced comeback kid Troy McClure has turned down the supporting lead in McBain 4 to direct and star in his own pet project, the contrabulous fabtraption of Professor Horatio Huffnagle. Which, will that gambit pay off? 20th Century Fox is betting it will.
Gotta get that jab at Fox in there.
This is kind of a joke. The idea that they're going for here is they wanted this to be as much of a Disney-esque knockoff as possible, and these films were very popular throughout the 70s and 80s, and often they were absolute garbage, and they like to think that this is the type of thing that would have just re-tanked Troy's
right. In that picture that they have for him advertising the movie, it's like sort of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang meets Inspector Gadget. And obviously the play is, I don't know, it reminds me, and this might have come after, there was that movie that was definitely after this episode that was Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium.
That's exactly what I think of when I see that picture now.
So I don't know if it was like a property that they remade into that more recent film, or if it's just, hey, we're doing gibberish words that sort of rhyme. So
or maybe they inspired Mr. Megorium's poem.
Here's hoping that yes, let's hope that was a property inspired by the after credits bit in a season 7 episode of The Simpsons.
Yeah, I hope so.
I think that last moment does tie into what you said about also being a little upset because obviously he got the role that he wanted, but obviously emotions are still running high with him, or else, I kind of felt like an Entourage moment here where he gets the moment he wants and then Vince is like, no, I'm going to do my own movie. I have a passion project I'm going to do because I'm trying to fill a void in my life that I just had appear. So it totally ties into what you were saying a little while ago, Daniel.
Maybe so, but he's also, I don't know, he's a bit of an asshole to forgive it all just on a suspicion there.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, that does bring us to the end of the third act and to the end of the episode of Fish Called Selma. First of all, Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us for this conversation. It was an absolute blast talking with you, as I very much expected it would be. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about this episode before we call it a day?
Oh, boy. Wow. I mean, I've already waxed poetic on how much I just enjoy. I could talk all day just about how much I love Phil Hartman's delivery, and same to not quite of an extreme, Jeff Goldblum does a fantastic job. All right, we covered Smelling of Troy. We've covered My Love Job. I think I'm good.
Awesome, man. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
It was an absolute blast.
Thank you, too, for having me.
Absolutely.
a
Richie,
lot of
before we
fun.
get out of here, is there anything else that you or that book of yours want to point out?
My book, The Simpsons, A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family, does point out some of the posters on Troy's walls, which
Nice.
Astro Heist,
I was hoping it would.
Astro Heist Gemini 3, Incident at Noon, and My Darling Beef Eater. So I kind of want to see the posters again and then see the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Very
and then
cool.
The marquee at the Aphrodite Inn, which you can see in the episode, it says today Mr. and Mrs. McClure and the Share and contest winner. So
contest winner.
A quick little jab at Share there.
And just another quick dunk while they have the
'Cause
opportunity.
why not?
So we should all tune in for that
Yeah,
one.
For sure. I also have two
Oof.
very quick things, one of which is just a fun tie-in. The two songs that were created in this episode for the Planets of the Apes musical, the Dr. Zaius and the Chimpanzee to Chimpanzee, which is the same. It's just the whole musical sequence. There was technically two, but they tied them together as one. That was composed by Alf Clausen, who's done so much of the music on The Simpsons. But the fun tie-in is Alf had actually previously worked as a copyist on the movie Planet of the Apes, the original 1968 film.
That is ridiculous.
Isn't that
That
wonderful?
is a ridiculous connection.
So the other great...
Ooh,
go
can
ahead.
I chime in real quick?
Please.
I did want to comment. I was too distracted by singing earlier. Just the method.
Which, again, I can't tell you how beautiful your voice is, sir. That was
Oh
amazing.
my. Oh wow. I wanted to say that I just love that style of songwriting that they do, where you see it pop up here and there in TV shows, where they don't have to write the whole song if they're showing a musical and they just cut between different, quote, songs, unquote, from the full show, where it's like we don't have to worry about the technicalities of writing like a chorus and a bridge and all of that. We can just do the funny part on to the next style and do the funny part there. And it's just so effective in how they utilize that here.
Yeah, they just immediately jump to the funny. You're absolutely right. Skip the part that we don't need to see, and it's not like we're missing the context of it.
As much as I'd love to see the full show of
Yes.
Stop the Planet of the Apes, I want to get off. Don't get
That
me
does
wrong.
become a thing. Yeah. I've teased a lot about other things with the episode running long, and I've talked a lot about Jeff Goldblum specifically and how much he really enjoyed working on the show and how much of a fan of the show he is. When I said this episode came in long, I wasn't kidding. The audio track for this episode originally came back at 28 minutes, which it's supposed to be no longer than 20 minutes because, again, the episodes are only really less than 23 minutes, and that's without, that's with the silences in between audio takes as well, like just some of the transition scenes. So 20 minutes is their normal cap. They're 8 minutes over. We've talked in the past about the idea that both Troy McClure and Selma are two of the most notoriously slow talkers of characters in The Simpsons, which contributed to that. However, Jeff Goldblum actually recorded this character's lines twice. The first time he came in, they had it written out, and the voice that he had was also just a real laid-back, slow-paced voice. And they actually had the idea to call him back and ask if he'd be willing to do it again. And he was absolutely fine with it. The only thing that he was disappointed about is that when he did his retakes, he wasn't able to get with the rest of the cast again. So he had to actually just shoot it with Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein solo. And he was disappointed because he loves the idea of working as an ensemble and being actually a part of the recording process. So he was fine doing the reshoots, though he did admit that at the time he was worried that it was because he had done something wrong.
Oh.
He was kind of embarrassed and mortified that he may have ruined the episode, but they explained to him that it was just simply a matter of time, so they wanted to change his energy, and Jeff Goldblum ended up coming up with an entirely new both voice and cadence to give to this character.
Poor
Really?
Jeff. He cares so much.
Yeah. That means
I
he's
think
a
it's
fan.
great, man. It's so cool that he's willing to give that much effort. I'll go ahead and share one more personal thing. The first time we got to talk with Mike Reese, I actually did a solo thing to record some commercials with him that he was running a promotion for us. We were running a promotion with him, I should say, for his book, Springfield Confidential. And so embarrassing because the first time we recorded it, I fucked up and I didn't get it copied correctly. So I had to call him back and be like, so can we do that again? And to Mike Reese's credit, he was so cool, so nice. He was like, yeah, man, no problem. I got you. But I felt so mortified at the time. And it somewhat reminded me of that. But that will do it for this week's Best Darn Diddly Review Show. As usual, we thank you so much for joining us on this Simpsons journey through the golden age and beyond. Daniel, do you want to shout out anything that you'd like to plug in terms of any shows or social media or anything online that you do or anything at all? Would you like to plug anything?
So yeah, I mean, I've got improv shows all the time at the Dallas Comedy House. For our time-traveling listeners, I have an Empty Inside show tonight at 8 p.m. So, come back a couple of months in the past and check that out. We just opened another 4-day weekend theater on Lower Greenville. So for those of you in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, if you want to catch that show on the weekends in Dallas, come and watch me perform in that. Sometimes I sing, so you get to hear my, quote, beautiful, unquote, voice on stage.
That's my quote, and I'm proud of it.
It's my quote, and I'm sticking to it.
I love legitimate theater.
Yeah, but, I mean, that'd be about all I have to plug are my live improv comedy shows.
Very cool. If you do live in the Dallas area, make sure you go see Daniel perform. He's an absolutely wonderful improviser, I should say. Whatever. He's an improvised comedian. Fuck it. He's funny. Go see him.
Nailed it.
Also, make sure you follow Richie at @thewiz_kid23 everywhere online. I'm at Mr. Most Days Off. You can follow our show at Best Darn Diddly. That's DIDDLY. And do make sure you come back next week. We're going to have another wonderful guest, and we're going to be talking about the episode Bart on the Road.
It's the part we were born to play, babies.
So until next time, I love you, Dr. Zaius.
Hey everybody, this is Lubes!
What?
What?
Kinda get caught up in the moment, you know what I mean?
Jesus Christ. Alright,
I'm sorry, man.
Take two.
Hey everybody, this is Goobs!
And I'm Ripkin.
And I'm Jenny Bean.
And you can follow us on Twitter at the Wrestle.
Whoa, dude.
Shit, son of a bitch.
You pulled the Goobs there.
God damn. Yeah. Alright, sorry, man. Take three.
Hey everybody, this is Goobs!
And I'm Ripkin.
And I'm Jelly Bean. Oh, man.
God, son of a bitch. Now I want jelly beans.
I want jelly beans too, besides the disgusting kind.
We seriously, we got
I'm
this.
just going to eat some of these jelly beans.
No.
Nom-noms.
Fuck, those are good. Okay, take 5, guys.
Hey everybody, this is Goobs!
And I'm Ripkin.
And I'm Jenny Bean.
And we are the Derailers!
And you can find us on Twitter at the Derailers. Or you can find us on iTunes, Buzzsprout, and YouTube.
Make sure to leave a comment, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, smash the bell, do whatever you gotta do to keep this train on a track, because you know we won't, folks.
We also happen to be on Instagram.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We're on Instagram at WrestleNerds. You can follow me at Little Sock Puppets. You can follow Ripkin at
Ripkin WN. But more importantly, listen on iTunes, Buzzsprout, and YouTube. Derailers!